Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me to share this big day with you, celebrating 200 years of Bibles in South Africa. I mean, that is just unbelievable and just awesome. And we know how precious our Bibles are. You can lose any book, but that one you don't want to lose. So thank you so much for making sure that we always have the word of God in our homes. Today, I want to talk about the issue of race and gender in South Africa and the world. And this issue, for me, it's not something that I have, personally been involved in terms of the broader struggle. But recently, I just had a growing burden about it. And what was frustrating for me was the fact that as a society, as institutions, and the world, we are just sitting around these issues and we are not seeing enough progress. And we have to acknowledge the fact that even in the world and in South Africa, we've made a lot of progress. Our government has come up with all sorts of programs to make sure that we make that progress. And the world also, a lot of things have changed. But we have to acknowledge the fact that the plight of Black people and women, we still have a long way to go in that regard. We were excited when we defeated colonialism and apartheid in the continent. But after 60 years of freedom since Ghana obtained independence in 1959, we are beginning to realize that our leaders are not taking us to the promised land that we're hoping they would take us. In fact, we are seeing the opposite, where we are experiencing maladministration and corruption in large scales. Things are just getting worse instead of better. And in terms of, just destruction of the economy, destruction of our institutions, and that having a major impact on poor people, when in fact what we're hoping is that poverty and so what is frustrating me about all of these three issues that I've mentioned is the fact that the struggle depends so much on people changing. So if white people would change, then the lives of Black people would be good. If men would change, then the lives of women will change. If our leaders would change, then, as Africa would grow and prosper. And for me, that is very frustrating. I suppose as an entrepreneur, you make a decision to follow a certain vision. And when you follow that, you know that will succeed because it depends on you for you to succeed. But it's just frustrating for me that for us to see victory in these areas, it depends on people changing. So I then said that I'll join in the struggle my own way. And I just want to share about that today. So what is coming to me strongly is the fact that Isaiah 61 addresses these issues. Isaiah, for me, as a prophet, I just find him to be a prophet who really came before his time, because he saw the human condition so clearly. And this is before psychology or psychiatry even became a discipline. He saw the human condition to be poor in mind and spirit, in prison, needing to be set free from its prison. He saw it to be in darkness, needing light. He saw it to be broken, needing healing. And I know that as the church, we focus so much on, when we talk about Isaiah 61 and Luke 4, we talk so much about saving people from sin. But when I look at Isaiah 61 was not talking about sinners. He was burdened by a broken people and a broken society. And what he saw was that when the gospel is preached, we will see these captives being set free, and we will see people coming out of darkness and ignorance into the light. And when that happens, they will rise up and rebuild their broken lives and rebuild their broken cities. And it will be the end of the desolations that he saw in Israel. And, you know, we are told by the Bible that God again saw the human condition, and he said, and he was troubled, and he asked, who will go for us? And Jesus Christ lifted his hand and he said, I will go. And when he came here to launch his ministry, he again quoted Isaiah 61. And I strongly believe that Jesus Christ's vision, when he said, go to all the world and be witnesses for me, his vision was bigger than just saving sinners. His vision was to save humanity from this condition that Isaiah saw. But what do we do as the church? We are in our churches, preaching to ourselves while Rome is burning. I think now it is time for the church to expand their tents, as Isaiah 54 says, to extend the vision to what Jesus Christ saw, that the church would go out there and save humanity from its condition of brokenness. And to talk about this subject, then I just want to look at the origins of prejudice and racism. Prejudice is something that we've had for a long time. I am prejudiced against the other because they are different from me. This may be because of nationality, religion, culture, ethnicity. And we've always had prejudice against women in every culture. But racism is a newer phenomenon that started at the time of the slave trade. So there was a need to justify the slave trade. And so myths were created, especially against the African. They were said to be barbaric, savages, subhuman, lazy, inferior, ugly, and so on. And we know that there are myths around women as well, that they are weak, they are inferior, they belong in the kitchen, they can't even manage their own affairs, they can't even vote. Now, these myths are believed by everyone, and we are born in a society with these myths. And they seem to be true, because when we look at the condition in our society, the experience is that they seem to be so. Now, prejudice is a normal human phenomenon. All of us have some form of prejudice. It may be someone's personality or age or weight. But what cannot be tolerated is discrimination against the other because they are different. I share about my own experience with prejudice against animals. So I had a situation where there was an invasion of frogs in my house. I used to see them as I drove in at night jumping around. I was so irritated by this. The amount of energy I spent on it, the hatred I had for those frogs. And then one day, as I was doing my normal walking routine in the morning, one of them jumped out. And as I was about to curse, I stopped and I asked myself, by the way, what do I have against frogs? And I was shocked to find that I couldn't remember a single incident that I had with frogs. So all of my prejudice against them was socialized. They're ugly, they're slimy, and all the movies about frogs. So I Googled frogs. And I found out all sorts of wonderful things about frogs that I did not know. So my prejudice was based on ignorance. The lesson I learned from that was that prejudice is never about me. It is always about the other. So I cannot concern myself about someone who's prejudiced against me because of ignorance. And the other lesson that I learned from this was, I always wondered why white people have such strong feelings and emotion against fellow human beings. It just used to puzzle me. Like, for instance, our children went to private schools and I watched them, you know, developing friendships across the Calabar, attending each other's parties, having some of my daughter's white friends would end up in my bed. I would wake up at night and see some blonde hair in my bed. And then these same wonderful kids, by matric, they are racist. Because then my children were telling these traumatic stories of racism at school from both pupils and teachers. But this experience with these frogs then explained it all, that it is possible to be taught and socialized to be racist. There are many factors that are involved on these topics that we don't fully understand. So, as I'm saying that, how can we then, disadvantaged groups, be waiting for others to change? Because those who are privileged, the white people and the men, they don't want to change because they see these privileges as part of their identity. And they're afraid to lose their privilege. And let's look at the extreme cases. If you look at the white supremacist right now, you can see he's fighting for his identity because he doesn't know who he is if he is not superior. And he needs someone to be inferior for him to continue to be superior. And I just look at the tactics that they are using, intimidation and bullying. And for me, these tactics are not different from the bullies that I met in grade 1. Of course, we still need to understand the psyche of the white supremacist. Of course, I mean, they are powerful, they have money, Their guns are not toys, they are real. But the issue is that we are dealing with fear here. And let's look at the issue of gender-based violence in South Africa that is on the increase. When I look at most of the cases, it's women who are breadwinners in their, whether it's a family or partner, supporting a man who's not working. And the man is, we can see that Black men are angry. And I'm not claiming to be a social scientist here, but what I believe is that they're angry because they do not know who they are if they're not the breadwinner. So if you look at those myths of women being weak, they use brute force to prove that I'm still powerful and you are weak. So it just saddens me that Black people and women are held to ransom because of fear. And for me, they also deserve to find their true identity, because they are forced to fit into a box that society has designed and created for them. And how can they ever reach their full potential when they have got to function within these roles that have been assigned to them? They also deserve to find their true selves, who they truly are. They deserve to reach their full potential in life like everybody else. And I believe that they themselves, these disadvantaged groups, and the world is losing out as long as they are not allowed to find who they truly are. Now, when we look at this, I said to myself, okay, the progress we have seen around these topics has been through activism and protest action. And we have to, say that struggle must continue, because we cannot rest until we rid society and institutions of racism and discrimination. But these disadvantaged groups, they can't be expected to wait for that. What can they do in the meantime? That's when I realized that they are not helpless, because human beings are never helpless. Even as Africans, citizens of Africa, we are not helpless against these corrupt leaders. There is something that you can do. We can take back our power. And for me, if I focus on Black people and women, what do I mean by taking back their power? There are two aspects to it for me. First of all, to undo the damage that has been created around the myths that have been created about women and Black people. And I don't want to underestimate the amount of work that is needed to undo that work. But certainly they don't need someone's permission for them to embark on that journey of undoing that work, because they have to free themselves from the limiting beliefs that have been socialized by society and embark on a journey to find who they truly are. The second thing is that we don't know, because there's not been enough research on the psychological damage due to racism, colonialism, and discrimination. But again, we cannot wait for the research. We've got to embark on a journey of healing from those psychological wounds. The wounds may be universal, but they're very much personal, because each one of us can remember a time when we experience prejudice or racism. So you have to focus on your own healing. And there's a lot of that is happening in the world around these two topics. There's a lot of scientific research that has been put out around how we can rewire our brains. That research for me is very encouraging. And again, there are so many spiritual tools that are available that can help in the healing process. And that's why I'm challenging the church, because they can support this endeavor of healing, because they know about healing. Jesus Christ was all about healing. We know about healing the world. I mean, the secondary effects of these psychological wounds, we can see in the brokenness in Black families, especially the African and the colored families. The church can help there. What is holding us from applying Isaiah 61 and Luke 4 to heal this brokenness that we see in our nation? And so I believe that, as Isaiah saw, that when the light shines on the darkness and when the prisoners are released from their prison and when the brokenhearted are healed, they will rise up and rebuild the continent. And we can see progress in that regard, because that will put fire underneath the feet of these corrupt leaders, because they know that now we seem to be helpless, but as the prisoners get out of prison, they will realize that it's either they change or it's the end of them. So I see people awakened to who they truly are. I see a movement of people awakened to their authentic power. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and I wish you many more years of reading the Bible in South Africa. Thank you.